On our third wedding anniversary, my husband brought me a special breakfast at work. At first, I was just so happy, you know? I thought it was such a loving gesture. Oh, love, what a fool I was. My luck, my terrible, terrible luck, was that I was feeling sick that day. My stomach was just in knots from my gastritis, and I had absolutely no appetite, so I didn't eat. But he kept on insisting. He kept saying I looked weak, that I needed to eat something, that he'd made it all with so much care, and I couldn't just turn it down like that. And his insistence, gosh, that was the first red flag, the very first one. I told him I'd eat it. I just asked him to give me a few minutes, but I was lying. Deep down, I felt like something was very, very wrong. All that affection, all that pressure, it just wasn't like him. But I tried to ignore it, told myself it was just a silly feeling. But then I did something that still haunts me to this day. As soon as he left my office, I called in his new secretary, Madison, and I offered the breakfast to her. Her face just lit up. She thanked me 1,000 times, took the plate to her desk, and ate every last bite. Not even an hour went by, I swear. When I heard the scream and ran out to see, she was on the floor, convulsing, with white foam coming out of her mouth. The entire office just stopped, and I froze. My God, was it the breakfast I gave her? The breakfast my husband gave me? Was it poisoned? That's when I saw Michael running toward us. He looked down at her on the floor, then he looked at me, and with eyes just full of panic and rage, he hissed, "What did you do? Why her?" In that moment, the whole world stopped spinning. The sound of people screaming, the phones ringing, it all just faded away. The only thing I could hear was his question echoing in my head. Why her? It wasn't, what happened to her? It wasn't, oh my God, call an ambulance. It was, why her? And I understood. That plate wasn't for her. It was for me. But for you to really understand the depth of that betrayal, and how a man I loved could get to that point. Let me back up a little. My name is Catherine Williams, and I'm 48 years old. Today, I'm the CEO of Williams Logistics, here in Atlanta, Georgia. But this company wasn't always mine. It was the legacy of my first husband, James. A good man, a man who built this business from the ground up with sweat and honesty. He passed away in 2017. Cancer took him from me and left a hole in my life and a 10-year-old daughter, Grace, for me to raise on my own. I poured myself into my work. I turned my grief into spreadsheets, into contracts, into growth. The company became my refuge and my daughter's future. 2 years later, in 2019, I met Michael Reynolds. He was a financial consultant, charming, smart, just seemed like the perfect man. He listened to me, he supported me, and for the first time in a long, long time, I felt seen not as James's widow or the boss of Williams Logistics, but just as Catherine. We got married in 2020. I truly believed I'd been given a second chance at happiness. I brought him into the company as Chief Operating Officer, gave him power, trust. I gave him my life. 4 months before that anniversary, Michael hired Madison Cooper, 26 years old, pretty, with that sparkle of youth in her eyes. He sold her to me as the most efficient secretary he'd ever seen. And to be fair, she was good at her job. But there was something more there. The way they'd laugh together in the hallway. The conversations that would just stop dead the second I walked up. I could feel a tension in the air, an electricity that wasn't professional. But what was I going to do? Accuse my husband of flirting with his secretary? I'd just sound like the jealous, insecure wife. So I swallowed it. I swallowed it and focused on my work, telling myself it was all in my head. That morning, April 12th, I got to the office early. It was our anniversary, but the workload was just enormous. I was in my office, reviewing some reports, when Michael walked in without knocking. He had on that big, toothpaste commercial smile and was holding a thermos container. He wished me a happy anniversary, saying, "I knew you'd come straight here, so I brought a surprise I fixed for you before dawn." He opened the container, and the strong smell of chitterlings filled my office. My stomach, which was already doing flips from the gastritis, just clenched up tight. I thanked him, told him it was a beautiful gesture, but explained I wasn't feeling well. His reaction is what scared me. He wouldn't take no for an answer. His smile got fixed. He started listing all the reasons why I had to eat. Said I was working too much, that the light had gone out of my eyes, that this would give me strength. He took a plastic fork he'd brought and tried to feed me a bite right there in my CEO chair. I pulled back, telling him, "Michael, please, not right now." His jaw tightened for just a fraction of a second, and then he smiled again and said the words that sent a chill right down my spine. "Just one bite, Kat. I made it for you. You have to try it." It wasn't an anniversary request. It was an order. Some primitive instinct, something every woman has, just went off inside me. I didn't want to make a scene there at the office. I took the plate, promised I'd eat it as soon as I finished an important call, and set it on my desk. He gave me a kiss on the forehead and left, looking satisfied. I just stared at that steaming plate, the smell making me sick. My office door was slightly ajar, and I could see Madison at her desk. And right there, in that moment, I saw a way out. A way to get rid of the food and that awful feeling without starting a fight. I called out to her, asking if she could come in for a second. She came in, helpful as always. I forced my best boss lady smile and explained the situation. "Listen, Madison, my husband brought me this special breakfast, but my stomach just isn't cooperating today. I know you're from Alabama, so I thought maybe you'd like it. It's a shame to just throw it away." Her eyes went wide with happiness, and she told me she'd love that, thanking me over and over. She took the container with a gratitude that made me feel an instant wave of relief, and right after, a pang of something I couldn't quite name. She went back to her desk, which was right in my line of sight, and started eating with an appetite I almost envied. I tried to work, but my eyes kept drifting back to her every now and then. She seemed fine, happy. I started to relax, thinking to myself, "See, Catherine, it was just you being paranoid. The man makes you a nice surprise and you're already imagining a conspiracy." I laughed at myself. I was just about to call my biggest client when I heard her fork fall. The sound of plastic hitting the carpet. Then a gasp. She put her hand on her stomach, and then the scream. A sound that came from the depths of her soul, a scream of agony that turned my blood to ice, and the chaos began. The chaos started, but I was in the eye of the storm. Still, frozen. The world around me was moving in slow motion, and at the same time, way too fast. People were yelling. Someone was screaming into the phone with 911. And Madison was still on the floor. I could see her expensive dress, a gift Michael had given her, stained with blood. Her eyes were rolled back, and all I could think about was the plate, the smell of the food, the joy on her face when she took it. That's when Michael got to me. He didn't run to help Madison. No, he came straight for me, grabbed my arm with a force I never knew he had, and with his face inches from mine, he hissed those words that sealed his fate. "What did you do?" "Why, her?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. The air left my lungs. He didn't ask, "What happened?" He didn't scream for help. He asked what I did, and why her. In that 1 millisecond, the fog of my denial, of my refusal to see what had been right in front of my face for months, just vanished. That plate, that insistence, that smile that never reached his eyes, it all clicked into place. The poison was meant for me. And he, my husband, the man I shared my bed with, was furious not because a young woman was dying, but because the wrong target had been hit. The paramedics arrived like a tornado. They were efficient, fast, speaking in codes I couldn't understand. They got Madison onto a stretcher, and the sight of her being carried out of my office, past the desks of my employees, that's something that will be burned into my memory forever. Michael, suddenly, did a complete 180. The angry panic gave way to a performance of a concerned boss. He put his hand on my back with a fake tenderness that made my skin crawl, and spoke loudly so everyone could hear, "My God, Kat, this is a nightmare. She's going to be okay, isn't she? She has to be okay." I looked at him, and for the first time, I saw the monster behind the mask. And all I could do was just nod my head, silent. We drove to the hospital in my car, a heavy silence broken only by his fake sobs. He'd say things like, "I just don't understand. She's so young. What could have possibly happened?" And I just sat there, quiet, staring out the window, watching the city go by in a blur. Every word out of his mouth was a knife twisting in the open wound in my chest. He was testing me, seeing what I knew, seeing if his plan still had any chance of working. I felt dirty, like an accomplice to a crime I didn't even know was happening. The guilt of giving her that plate started to eat me alive. I could have just thrown it in the trash. Why didn't I just throw it in the trash? The hospital waiting room was cold, white. The smell of antiseptic in the air made me nauseous. Michael paced back and forth, running his hand through his hair, the perfect picture of anguish. But I could see it. I could see his eyes darting down the hallway, not with the hope of seeing a doctor, but with the fear of a criminal. I just sat there, motionless, replaying the entire morning in my head. Every single detail. The insistence. The phrase, "You have to try it." The rage in his whisper. I had no proof, but deep in my soul, I already had the verdict. After what felt like an eternity, a doctor appeared. An older man, with a tired face. He looked at the two of us, asking if we were responsible for Ms. Cooper. Michael stepped forward immediately, introducing himself as her boss and asking how she was. The doctor sighed and led us to a more private corner. His voice was low, grave, as he explained that it hadn't been a sudden illness or an allergic reaction. They'd found a toxic substance in her system. He said the word that made the floor disappear from under my feet. She was poisoned. I looked at Michael. He shot his eyes wide open, his mouth fell open, a perfect performance of shock and horror, crying out, "Poisoned? But how? Where? My God!" I just stayed silent, feeling my heart pound out of control. The doctor went on, and his voice got even softer, more hesitant, as he looked between us. He said there was something else, a factor that complicated everything. We ran a series of tests, and Ms. Cooper was pregnant, about 5 weeks. The air got thin. Pregnant. Madison was pregnant. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. Michael went rigid beside me. The doctor continued, explaining that because of the trauma her body went through, she lost the baby. I closed my eyes. The tragedy was bigger than I could have imagined. A life, a tiny little life, had been lost in this dirty game, and I knew, with a certainty that ached in my soul, whose child it was. I opened my eyes and stared at Michael. His face turned ashen. This was no longer a performance. This was the real shock of a man who had just found out that his monstrous plan had not only failed, but had also killed his own unborn child. He didn't have time to process it, to come up with a new lie. In that moment, 2 uniformed police officers rounded the corner and started walking toward us, asking for Mr. Reynolds and Mrs. Williams. That's when the monster's survival instinct kicked in. Michael looked at the police, he looked at me, and the mask of the concerned husband and boss fell away, revealing the face of pure desperation. He took a step forward, pointing a shaking finger right at me. His voice came out loud, accusatory, echoing down the quiet hospital corridor. And he screamed. He screamed for the cops, for the nurses, for the whole world to hear. "It was her! She did this! She poisoned my secretary out of jealousy!" Michael's finger pointed at me, felt like the barrel of a gun. Every word out of his mouth was a bullet. "It was her! She did it out of jealousy!" The hospital hallway turned into a stage, and I was the villain in his little play. The police officers, who'd had a neutral look before, were now staring at me with suspicion. It's a classic story, isn't it? The older wife, the successful husband, the young, beautiful secretary. Michael served me up to them on a silver platter, with the motive already gift-wrapped. And me, I was in such shock I could barely form a sentence. I was taken to the police station. To the police station. Me, Catherine Williams, a woman who had never even gotten a speeding ticket in her life. The interrogation was the most humiliating experience of my entire life. The room was small, cold, and it smelled like stale coffee and desperation. The detective, a man named Miller, looked at me over the top of his glasses like I was a bug under a microscope. He didn't call me Mrs. Williams. It was Catherine. He wanted me to know that in that room, my CEO title meant absolutely nothing. He made me tell the story of that morning about 5 times. And every time, when I got to the part where I offered the food to Madison, he'd just shake his head slowly. He asked me if I knew about their affair. I said no. He asked if I didn't find it strange that my husband would make a surprise like that at the office. I didn't know what to say. Every question was a trap, and I could feel the net closing in around me. They let me go hours later on the condition that I didn't leave Atlanta. My lawyer, who showed up in the middle of that nightmare, said I was officially a person of interest. A person of interest in the poisoning of my husband's mistress. The irony was so sick it was suffocating. I went back home, to the house I shared with Michael, and the place had never felt so foreign, so contaminated. Every object, every picture frame with our fake smile seemed to be mocking me. I walked into the kitchen and saw the pan he must have used to fix the chitterlings. My stomach turned and I ran for the bathroom. After I'd thrown up everything, I looked at myself in the mirror. The color had drained from my face and my eyes were swollen. But behind the shock, behind the pain, a flame started to burn. A cold, sharp anger. They wanted a villain? They wanted the jealous, vengeful wife? No. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction. I was not going to be the passive victim in this story. Michael made one mistake. He didn't kill me, and he underestimated me. I picked up my cell phone and dialed the number of the only person in the world I trusted completely at that moment. Aisha, I need you, at my house, now. Aisha, my executive assistant, was there in less than 20 minutes. She's not just my employee, she's my friend, almost a little sister. She saw me at my absolute worst when James died and helped me get back on my feet. When she walked in and saw the state I was in, she didn't ask any questions. She just hugged me, and in that hug I just fell apart. I cried all the tears I hadn't cried at the station, all the humiliation, all the fear, all the pain of the betrayal. When I finally calmed down, I told her everything, every single detail. His insistence, the whisper in the office, the accusation at the hospital. Aisha listened to it all, her face turning from concern to a quiet, contained fury. When I finished, she asked only one question. What are we going to do? And that's when the CEO inside me woke up. The woman who runs a $15 million company. We're not waiting for the police, Aisha. They already have the story they want. We're going hunting. We are going to find every rotten thing, every lie, every dollar this man has hidden. I'm not just going to prove my innocence. I'm going to prove his guilt, and I'm going to destroy his life just like he tried to destroy mine. My living room became our war room. Aisha brought her laptop. I got mine. The target was clear. Michael Reynolds. We knew we couldn't look for the poison. That was the police's job. But Michael was greedy. His plan was to get my money. And greed, oh, greed always leaves a trail. We started with the company's finances. As CEO, I had access to everything. As COO, so did he. But he was just the COO, and I was the owner. I had the master key to every server, every account. Aisha, who's a genius with numbers, started cross-referencing payments from the last 3 years. We spent hours that night, fueled by coffee and a fierce determination. Around 3 a.m, when my eyes were burning from exhaustion, Aisha stopped typing. The silence stretched for a few seconds. Her voice was low when she said, "Catherine, I found something." She turned her laptop toward me. On the screen, a line item that repeated every quarter, a transfer to a consulting firm called Apex Strategic Solutions. I'd never heard of them. Aisha had already done the research. There was no website, no business registration, nothing. It was a shell company. I asked her what the amount was. Aisha swallowed hard before telling me. Their quarterly payments started small almost 3 years ago, but the last one, last month's, was for $38,000. My blood ran cold. $38,000 to a company that didn't exist. Aisha kept clicking, her fingers flying across the keyboard, her face lit by the screen's glow. She looked up at me, and her eyes were filled with a terrible realization. And then she said the sentence that changed everything. The sentence that showed the rabbit hole went much, much deeper. Catherine, he wasn't just cheating on you. He's been stealing from you. For years. Stealing from you. For years. Those words from Aisha echoed in my living room like a death sentence. The exhaustion vanished, replaced by an ice-cold adrenaline. It's one thing to be cheated on. It hurts. It humiliates you. It destroys your trust. But to be robbed by the man you brought into your home, into your business, into the legacy of your late husband, that's a whole other level of violation. This was war. And I was ready to fight. We spent the rest of the night and all through the early morning, buried in bank statements, invoices, and payment records. It was like pulling a loose thread on an expensive sweater. The more we pulled, the more the whole thing unraveled. Aisha was methodical. She tracked every payment made to Apex Strategic Solutions and 2 other shell companies we uncovered. The names were generic, boring, designed to go unnoticed. Global Transport Advisors, Summit Logistics Consulting. They were all accounts opened in Delaware, a state famous for making it easy to create front companies. Michael wasn't stupid. He knew how to hide the money. But he didn't know I had Aisha. And Aisha does not give up. By dawn, with the Atlanta sun starting to paint the sky orange, we had the final number. $380,000. That's what he had funneled out of my company in less than 3 years. $380,000 that should have gone to my daughter's future. I felt sick to my stomach. That was money for my employees' bonuses, for the new trucks we needed, for renovations at the warehouse. And what did he use it for? To bankroll his double life. As we pulled on the money trail, another trail started to appear. Aisha, in her genius, managed to get access to the records of the bank accounts receiving the payments. And from there, she found the expenses. And one expense in particular caught our eye. A monthly payment religiously made on the 1st of every month for the exact amount of $3,800. It was a transfer to a luxury real estate company. A quick search showed us the address. A high-end apartment complex in Buckhead, the ritziest area of Atlanta. I knew the building. It had a spa, a rooftop pool, valet parking, a lifestyle that Madison Cooper, on her secretary's salary, could never have afforded. There was no doubt left. It was their love nest, paid for with my money. The sheer audacity of it was unbelievable. He didn't just have a mistress. He set her up in a palace 15 minutes from our house and made me pay for it. With every discovery, the image of the man I loved shattered into one more piece until there was nothing left but a greedy monster. But the discovery that really set me up for the checkmate came from an unexpected place. While Aisha was digging through the financials, I decided to look at the human side of his betrayal. I started thinking about who he was before me. Friends, family, past relationships. And one name came to mind. A name he rarely mentioned, and always with a certain disdain, like she was an embarrassing part of his past. Samantha Chen, his college girlfriend. I remembered him saying once that she was too intense and had gone into a boring career. I got on my laptop and started searching. Social media, public records, anything. And that's when I found it. Her LinkedIn profile, Samantha Chen, and right under her name, her profession. Senior pharmacist at a major drugstore chain here in Atlanta. My heart leaped. Pharmacist. The word flashed in my mind like a neon sign. The poison, the toxic substance the doctors mentioned. Madison's sudden collapse. It had to be her. Michael wouldn't have the knowledge or the access to get something like that on his own. I showed Aisha. She stopped what she was doing and looked at the screen, then at me. Her jaw dropped. My God, Catherine. This is it. This is the connection. But how could we prove it? It was his word against hers. We needed something concrete. And then, Aisha, with that dangerous glint in her eyes that I loved so much, had an idea. She started digging deeper into the company's digital records, emails, search histories, call logs from his corporate phone. And there it was. Buried among hundreds of calls to suppliers and clients was one number that repeated, several times over the past few weeks. Short calls, 2 or 3 minutes max. Aisha threw the number into Google. The first result, the pharmacy where Samantha Chen worked as the manager. It was them. The circle was closing. Michael, Jordan, his cousin, who we discovered was the owner of the shell companies, and now, Samantha. A conspiracy to rob me, erase me, and take everything. I stood up and walked to the window. The city was waking up. Cars were starting to fill the streets. Normal people, going to their normal jobs, with their normal lives. And here I was, in my multi-million-dollar home, plotting how to expose an attempted murder orchestrated by my own husband. I looked at my reflection in the glass. The woman with the tired face was gone. In her place was a woman with fire in her eyes. They had messed with the wrong person. They had woken up the sleeping lioness. And I was going to hunt every last one of them down, one by one. And the first on my list had a name, Samantha Chen. Just knowing her name wasn't enough. I needed her to talk. I needed a confession, some piece of proof that tied Michael directly to the poison. Going to the police with a theory based on an ex-girlfriend's name wasn't going to get me anywhere. Detective Miller had already made it crystal clear who he suspected. I had to play Michael's game, dirty and from the shadows. I called my lawyer, David, a ruthless man I'd known since James's time. I explained the situation, the connection to the pharmacist, the need to move fast and quiet. He understood immediately. David gave me the strategy. He told me, "We can't accuse her directly, Catherine. She'll clam up. We have to offer her a lifeline, one that looks a whole lot better than going down with Michael's ship." The plan was simple and brutal. We had to corner her, show her we knew everything, and that her only chance of not ending up in a cell next to her ex-boyfriend was to cooperate. And I was going to be the bait. The next day, I dressed for war. An immaculate, charcoal gray pantsuit, hair pulled back in a tight bun, makeup that was understated but firm. I needed to look like the CEO in control, not the betrayed wife on the verge of a breakdown. I went to the pharmacy in the late afternoon, the time when it would be winding down. David, my lawyer, was waiting in his car a block away. I walked in, and the little bell on the door chimed, announcing my arrival. The place was clean, organized, with that sterile smell of medicine. And there she was, behind the main counter, wearing a white lab coat. Samantha Chen. She was small, with delicate features, and an intelligent but tired look in her eyes. When she saw me, she didn't recognize me right away. I walked slowly to the counter. She gave me a professional smile, asking how she could help me. My voice came out steadier than I expected. "I'm here to talk to you, Samantha, about Michael Reynolds." Her smile froze. The color drained from her face. She glanced around nervously and whispered that I must have her confused with someone else. I leaned over the counter, lowering my voice so only she could hear. "No, I don't. I know about the phone calls. I know about the meetings. And I know what you gave him." Panic flooded her eyes. She started to tremble, telling me she didn't know what I was talking about and that I needed to leave or she'd call security. It was my turn to smile, a smile with absolutely no humor in it. "Call them. Call security. Call the police. They would love to know that a licensed pharmacist is supplying controlled substances to a man being investigated for attempted murder. You see, Samantha, being an accomplice to a crime like this, the sentence is almost the same as the person who did it, and federal prisons are not pleasant places for women like us." Every word was a calculated blow. I saw the internal struggle on her face. Loyalty to a man who, I was sure, had already thrown her under the bus the second things went south, versus the primal fear of losing everything, her career, her freedom, her life. She glanced toward the small office in the back, muttering, "Not here." I just nodded. We went into her little office, a cramped cubicle that smelled like paper and disinfectant. As soon as the door closed, she fell apart. Tears started streaming down her face. She started talking, the words tumbling over each other. She told me Michael had reached out to her months ago, rekindling a friendship, that he played the victim, saying he was in an unhappy marriage, that I was controlling, cold, that he just needed a clean way out. He manipulated her, used their past, the old affection she still had for him. He didn't ask for a poison, no. He was smarter than that. He described my health problems, my gastritis, my weak heart, and asked for something that could induce cardiac arrest, something that would look natural, that wouldn't leave obvious traces in an autopsy. She confessed she gave him an extremely high dose of a medication, something that, in excess, would cause the exact symptoms he described, and that, as a side effect in a pregnant woman, could and would cause what happened to Madison. She cried, saying she didn't know about the mistress, that she didn't know about the pregnancy, that Michael swore it was just to scare me, to make me realize I needed to slow down. They were pathetic lies, but I let her talk. I needed her to empty the glass. When she finally stopped sobbing, I made my move. "Samantha, I don't want you to go to jail. You were used, manipulated just like I was, but I need proof. Irrefutable proof that he was the one who planned all of this." She shook her head, saying she had nothing, that all their conversations were over the phone or in person. But I pushed. "Think, Samantha, anything, an email, a text message, anything." She was silent for a long minute, her face smudged with mascara. And then her eyes widened. She opened her desk drawer and pulled out a small black flash drive. Her voice was a whisper. He was paranoid. Always was. He was afraid I'd record him to blackmail him, so he recorded some of our conversations to protect himself, to have something on me if I ever decided to talk. She held out a trembling hand with the flash drive. I copied the files from his phone one day when he was in the bathroom. For my own protection. The devil's voice is on here. I took that flash drive from her hand and I felt a weight, a density, that had nothing to do with the tiny object's size. It was the weight of the truth, the weight of justice, the devil's voice. I thanked Samantha with a nod, nothing more. She had played her part, driven by the purest instinct of self-preservation. I walked out of the pharmacy and got into the car where David, my lawyer, was waiting. I didn't say a word, just handed him the small black device. He looked at the flash drive, then at me, and a rare smile of admiration crossed his face. He said, "Let's go hear what the devil has to say." We didn't go to my house. We went to David's office, an impersonal, secure place where the walls didn't hold the memories my house did. Aisha was already there, waiting for us. The three of us sat around a large mahogany table. David plugged the flash drive into his laptop, and the silence in the room was so thick I could feel it in my bones. He opened the folder. There were 5 audio files, all dated within the last few weeks. He clicked on the first one. Michael's voice filled the room. The same voice that told me good morning, that asked how my day was, that said, "I love you," before we went to sleep. But here, in this recording, the voice was different. It had a metallic, cold edge, completely devoid of any emotion. It was him talking to Samantha. At first it was small talk, memories of college, him charming her, laying the groundwork. My hands started to sweat. My stomach churned at his phoniness. And then he started talking about me. She's always tired, always stressed. The company is killing her. He described my gastritis, my headaches, exaggerating every symptom, painting a picture of a fragile woman on the verge of a collapse. He was building the narrative, the perfect excuse for a sudden death. Aisha put her hand over mine, and I squeezed it hard, anchoring myself to her presence. David skipped to the third file. The conversation was more direct. Samantha's voice sounded hesitant, asking, "Michael, this is dangerous. What exactly do you want?" And then, his voice, crystal clear, sharp as glass, said the words that burned my soul. "I need something strong, Sam. Something that'll speed up her heart, cause an arrhythmia. I want it to look like a sudden health problem, clean. A tragedy, you know? The poor, hard-working CEO who just couldn't take the pressure." He paused, and I held my breath. "I need to avoid a messy divorce and keep the entire estate. This woman is an obstacle. An obstacle." That's what I had become to him. After 3 years of marriage, of shared nights, of family dinners with my daughter, I was an obstacle, a problem to be removed so he could get his hands on my money. Hot, silent tears began to stream down my face. They weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of pure rage. Aisha passed me a tissue, her own eyes blazing with fury. David, on the other hand, was impassive, the face of a poker player who had just been dealt the winning hand. The last audio file was the worst. It was more recent, just a few days before our anniversary. Michael's voice was impatient. He was demanding, "Have you got it yet? Her anniversary is coming up. It's the perfect opportunity. A special breakfast, a loving gesture. No one will ever suspect a thing." Samantha tried to argue, talked about the dosage, the risks, and he cut her off. "Just do it, Sam. Think of it as a favor. A very big favor that I will never forget." It was the voice of a predator cornering its prey. He wasn't asking. He was commanding, and she, weak and deluded, had obeyed. When the recording ended, the silence that fell in the room was deafening. David closed the laptop. "We have him," he said, his voice calm, but with a tone of finality. "This is more than enough. Conspiracy to commit murder. It's the end of the line for Michael Reynolds." An immense relief washed over me, so strong my legs felt weak. It was over. The truth was right there, recorded, undeniable. We laid out the plan. David would take the recording to Detective Miller first thing in the morning. He would deliver not just the proof of the crime, but also the financial records Aisha had compiled. We would expose everything at once: the theft, the affair, and the attempted murder. I felt lighter than I had in months. For the first time since I saw Madison on the floor, I felt like I could breathe again. I was leaving David's office, the sky outside already dark, when my cell phone rang. I looked at the screen. It was the number for my company's reception desk. I thought it was strange at this hour. I answered. The voice of the receptionist, Brenda, was shaking. "Mrs. Williams, I'm so sorry to call, but there's a woman here. She's making a scene in the lobby. She says she's Madison's mother, and she's demanding to see Mr. Reynolds right now." My blood ran cold. Madison's mother, Loretta Hayes, from Alabama. I'd seen her name on her daughter's emergency contact form. What was she doing here? And what did she want with Michael? I told Brenda not to let anyone leave and that I was on my way. The storm, it seemed, was far from over. I drove back to my office like a bat out of hell. The image of Madison's mother, a woman I'd never met, confronting the man who destroyed her daughter, gave me a new kind of urgency. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about Madison, about the baby she lost, about this simple woman from Alabama who had driven across 2 states looking for answers. When I arrived, the lobby of Williams Logistics, normally a calm and professional space, looked like a theater stage. And at the center of it was Loretta Hayes. She was a black woman in her 50s, short, sturdy, with a look in her eyes that held the weight of the entire world. She wore a simple church dress and clutched a worn purse in her hands. And in front of her stood Michael. His face was drawn and uncomfortable, trying to use his charm to de-escalate the situation, but failing miserably. A few curious employees watched from a distance. I instructed security to keep their distance, but to be ready, and I told the receptionist to allow Loretta in. I wanted this scene to play out. I wanted Michael to be confronted. As soon as Loretta saw me, she stopped yelling at Michael for a second. Her eyes sized me up and down. There was pain in them, but also an unbreakable dignity. She didn't know the whole truth, of course. To her, I was still the jealous wife the police were looking into. But her grief was bigger than any suspicion. She turned back to Michael, and her voice, hoarse from crying and rage, echoed across the marble lobby. You promised my baby girl the world. Promised you'd leave your wife. Promised you'd take care of her, of the baby. My grandbaby. You killed my grandbaby." Michael tried to calm her, speaking softly, telling her it was all a misunderstanding, that they should talk in private. But Loretta didn't want privacy. She wanted the world to hear. Misunderstanding? My daughter is lying in a hospital bed crying day and night. The doctor said she might never be able to have children again. And you call that a misunderstanding? Michael's face twisted. He looked around, seeing the stares from the employees, seeing me, standing by the door, watching everything. He was losing control. The charming predator was being revealed as a cornered rat, and then he did the worst possible thing he could have done. He made the fatal mistake of thinking that woman's pain had a price. He pulled his wallet from his pocket, opened it, and took out a thick wad of $100 bills. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. He held the money out to her, offering it for expenses. The silence that followed was heavy, electric. Loretta Hayes looked at the money in his hand. Then she looked at his face. And then she laughed, a short, bitter laugh, with no joy in it at all. And with a swift motion, she slapped Michael's hand, sending the $100 bills flying through the air like dirty confetti. The money scattered across the floor of my lobby. Her voice, when it returned, was like thunder. $7,500? Is that what my grandbaby's life is worth? Is that what my daughter's future is worth? She took a step forward, her finger jabbing at his chest. I may be poor, Mr. Reynolds. I may come from a town you couldn't even find on a map. But I do not sell my daughter's blood. You save your dirty money to pay for your lawyer. You're gonna need him. That scene, the dignity of that woman, her righteous fury, the contempt with which she treated his money. It broke me and rebuilt me all at once. My own pain, my own anger, seemed small next to that force of nature. In that moment, my decision was cemented. This wasn't just about proving my innocence anymore. It was about getting justice for Loretta, for Madison, for the baby that was never born. The passive, quiet collection of evidence was over. It was time to act. It was time to burn the circus down and expose the clown. Michael, completely humiliated, finally got security to escort Loretta out. He came toward me, his face a mask of controlled fury, muttering about how that woman was crazy and he was going to sue her. I just stared at him, and for the first time, I didn't look away. There was no more fear, only contempt. I told him, "You do what you have to do, Michael." I turned and walked toward the private elevator to my office, leaving him standing there in the middle of the money scattered on the floor. Inside the elevator, adrenaline was coursing through my veins. The plan to wait until morning to go to the police seemed too slow, too passive. Loretta Hayes showed me that justice sometimes needs a push. It needs a stage, and I had the perfect stage, the one place where Michael felt the most powerful, where he thought he had conquered his kingdom. The boardroom. I picked up my phone. Aisha answered on the first ring. "Aisha," I said, my voice as cold as steel. "Call an emergency board meeting. For 1 hour from now, all members, no exceptions. Tell them it's about a catastrophic security breach in the company, and get the projector in the conference room ready. We're going to give a presentation." The next hour was a blur. Aisha was a hurricane of efficiency, summoning every board member, making sure they would all be there, either in person or by video call. There were 6 of them, besides me and Michael. Businessmen and women who had known James, who had watched me take over the company and make it thrive. People whose trust Michael had worked so hard to win. While Aisha organized the meeting, I locked myself in my office with David, my lawyer, who arrived in minutes. We prepared the presentation. It wasn't an accusation. It was an execution. Methodical, cold, and undeniable. When the time came, I walked into the boardroom. Michael was already there, sitting in his usual chair near the head of the table. He shot me a furious look, still seething from the scene in the lobby. He probably thought the meeting was about some logistics problem, something he, as COO, would easily handle. His arrogance was palpable. He felt safe in this room. Little did he know, he was sitting in his own courtroom. I sat at the head of the table, the seat that was mine by right, James's seat. I waited for everyone to settle. Silence fell. All eyes were on me. I took a deep breath. Thank you all for coming on such short notice. I've called this meeting because I've uncovered a series of grave breaches that compromise the financial integrity and the security of Williams Logistics, and the person responsible is in this room. The mood shifted instantly. Curiosity turned to tension. I saw Michael shift in his seat, a slight frown on his forehead. First, the theft, I said, and Aisha, from the corner of the room, pushed a button. The projector screen behind me lit up. The first image was the logo for Apex Strategic Solutions, and below it, a spreadsheet detailing every transfer, every date, every penny. Over the last 3 years, $380,000 have been funneled from our company into 3 shell corporations. I clicked to the next slide, which showed the registration documents for the companies. And these companies, as you can see, are registered to a single individual, Jordan Reynolds, cousin of our Chief Operating Officer, Michael Reynolds. The shock in the room was audible. People turned to stare at Michael. The color drained from his face. He opened his mouth to protest, but I cut him off. Please hold your questions until the end, Michael. My voice was pure ice. Then, the betrayal. The next slide appeared. It was a photo of the luxury apartment building in Buckhead. A large portion of this money was used to finance a lifestyle that doesn't align with the declared finances of certain employees. For example, the $3,800 monthly rent for this apartment. The next slide showed the lease agreement. An apartment leased by Michael for the exclusive use of his secretary, Madison Cooper. A murmur went through the room. It was one thing to expose financial embezzlement. It was another thing entirely to air his dirty laundry in front of everyone. Michael was livid, yelling that this was outrageous, an invasion of privacy, and that I was attacking him over personal issues. I didn't raise my voice. I just told him, "Sit down, Michael. I'm not finished." He hesitated, but the glares from the other board members forced him back into his seat. "Which brings us," I continued, my voice low and dangerous, "to the final act, the attempted murder. If the room was tense before, now you could cut the air with a knife." I looked Michael directly in the eye. As you know, Madison Cooper collapsed in our office. The police initially worked on the theory that I, driven by jealousy, had poisoned her. I paused, letting the accusation hang in the air. But the truth is far more sinister. I gave Aisha a nod. And then, the sound. Michael's voice, his recorded voice, filled the dead silence of the boardroom. "I need something strong, Sam. Something that'll speed up her heart. I want it to look like a sudden health problem, clean. I need to avoid a messy divorce and keep the entire estate. This woman is an obstacle." No one breathed. The recording continued, with him planning to use our anniversary as the perfect opportunity. When his voice finally fell silent, the quiet that followed was the heaviest thing I have ever felt. No one was looking at me. Every eye in that room was fixed on Michael. The blood had drained from his face. He was trembling, his eyes wide with pure terror and disbelief. He had been utterly and completely exposed. The king was naked. He opened and closed his mouth, but no sound came out. He was finished. And it was at that exact moment, at the peak of his humiliation, that the double doors of the boardroom swung open. Detective Miller walked in, followed by 2 uniformed officers. He didn't look at me. His eyes went straight to Michael. He boomed across the room. "Michael Reynolds, You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder." The officers moved quickly. One of them got Jordan, the cousin, who was cowering in a corner of the room like the coward he was. The other walked over to Michael, pulled the handcuffs from his belt, and with a metallic click that sounded like the bell of justice, he cuffed his hands behind his back. Michael didn't resist. He was in shock. As they led him out, past his colleagues, his business partners, he turned his head and looked at me. In that look, I didn't see hatred. I didn't see anger. I saw surprise. The surprise of a predator who, for the first time in his life, had been hunted by the prey. He had underestimated me right up to the very last second, and that was his final mistake. I just sat there at the head of the table, watching him be led away, feeling the weight of months of pain, fear, and betrayal finally begin to lift from my shoulders. Justice hadn't been quiet. It had been a spectacle, and he was the star. After they took him away, the boardroom, which had been simmering with tension, fell strangely quiet. The board members looked at me with a mixture of shock, pity, and a new kind of respect. No one knew what to say. I stood up, my legs a little shaky, but my voice was firm. "The company is secure. The problem has been contained. Aisha, please forward everyone the documents we've prepared. We will have another meeting in 48 hours to discuss the next steps and the restructuring of the board." I didn't wait for a response. I just turned and walked out, leaving behind the chaos I had orchestrated. Justice is a dirty business, and I needed a shower. The next few months were a whirlwind of legal proceedings. The trial was swift. With the audio recordings, the financial records, and the testimony from Samantha Chen, who took a plea deal to avoid prison, Michael had nowhere to run. He tried to blame her, his partners, me. But the jury didn't buy the story of the wronged businessman. The sentence came down on a rainy afternoon in September. Michael Reynolds was found guilty and sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for conspiracy to commit murder and fraud. 15 years. He walked into that courtroom a man of 50. He'd walk out an old man. Jordan, the cowardly cousin, got 6 years. He cooperated with the prosecution, giving up every detail of the money laundering scheme in exchange for a lighter sentence. Samantha, the deluded pharmacist, got luckier. She received a suspended sentence, but she lost her license forever. The career she'd spent years building, destroyed by a man who wouldn't think twice about sacrificing her. And Madison. Oh, Madison. She never fully recovered. Her body healed, but her ability to have children was gone forever. She didn't want to testify. As soon as she was discharged, her mother, Loretta, took her back to Alabama, away from the scandal, away from the city that nearly killed her. The last piece of the puzzle was the divorce. David, my lawyer, took the papers for Michael to sign in prison. There was no negotiation. He wasn't entitled to a thing. He waived any and all claims to my assets, my company, my life. I received the signed papers by courier. I looked at his signature, the name of the man I once loved, now just an ink stain on a document that set me free. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel relief. I felt an emptiness. The end of a terrible chapter. I took the papers, walked over to the fireplace in my living room, lit a fire, and tossed them into the flames, watching his name turn to ash. I thought that was the end of it. I thought with him in prison and the divorce finalized, I could finally start picking up the pieces. I was wrong. The final blow, the one that would haunt me for much longer than Michael's betrayal, came from where I least expected it. 3 days after his arrest, my cell phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered. The voice on the other end was weak, raspy, but unmistakable. It was Madison, calling from the hospital. She asked if I was Mrs. Williams. I said yes, and asked how she was feeling. There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and then her voice changed, turning sharp with bitterness. "I know what you did," she said. I was confused and asked what she was talking about. "The food," she spat. "That plate. I know you gave it to me on purpose. You knew something was wrong. A woman like you." You always know. You felt it. But you didn't care. I tried to interrupt, to tell her she was wrong, that I had no idea, but she wouldn't let me speak. Her voice gained strength, fueled by pain. You knew I was pregnant. You knew Michael loved me, that he was going to leave you for me. You could have warned me. You could have thrown that food in the trash. But you wanted me to suffer. You wanted both of us to lose everything. You sat on your queen's throne and watched me eat the poison that was meant for you. You're just as guilty as he is. Her words hit me like stones. I was standing in my kitchen, and my daughter Grace, who was 15 by now, walked in just then, home from school. She saw me on the phone, the shock clear on my face, and she stopped. I couldn't answer Madison. What could I say? That my gut had screamed danger, but I'd ignored it? That I felt a selfish relief at getting rid of that plate? That some dark part of me had perhaps enjoyed watching my husband's young mistress accept something that bothered me? Madison hung up on me, leaving me with the sound of silence and her accusations burning in my ear. I lowered the phone slowly. My hands were shaking. I looked at my daughter, standing in the kitchen doorway. Her eyes, so much like James's, were filled with a question, a doubt I never wanted her to have about me. She had seen the anguish on my face. She had heard the last part of Madison's rage. And then, with the innocent, terrified voice of a teenager watching the adult world crumble, Grace asked me the question that would split my soul in two. "Mom," she whispered, tears welling up in her eyes, Did you know the food was poisoned?" My daughter's question hung in the kitchen air, heavier than any accusation. "Mom, did you know?" The world could call me a victim, a hero, a woman who fought back. But Grace's look, her look was the only judgment that mattered. And in that moment, I saw the doubt in her eyes, a seed of mistrust that Madison's call had planted. My heart broke in a new and even more painful way. It's one thing to be betrayed by a man you chose. It's another to risk losing the trust of the child you brought into this world. I knelt in front of her, right there on the cold kitchen floor. I took her hands in mine. "Grace, look at me." I waited until her eyes met mine. "No," I said, my voice choked but firm. "I swear on your father's memory, I did not know the food was poisoned. I had no earthly idea that Michael was capable of something so monstrous." I saw a flicker of relief in her face, but the shadow of doubt was still there. And then I decided she deserved more than a simple answer. She deserved the ugly, complicated truth. "But," I continued, and my voice broke, "I felt it, honey. I felt that something was wrong. You know when you get a bad feeling, that chill down your spine that tells you not to do something? I felt that. His insistence, the look in his eye, it wasn't right. And I gave the plate to Madison anyway." The tears I'd been holding back started to fall. I don't know why, Grace. I don't know if it was because I was scared to confront him, or if it was because I just wanted the problem to go away, or if some ugly, dark part of me was satisfied to see his mistress take what I didn't want. I don't know. And that doubt, I think I'm going to have to live with that forever. That conversation was the hardest one of my life, but it was also the most important. It was the beginning of healing, not just for me, but for the two of us. In the months that followed, life without Michael was strange, quiet. The house felt too big. But little by little, we started to fill the emptiness. Not with a new man, but with our own company. We started having movie nights, just the two of us. We took a cooking class together. We talked about everything. About her dad, about the future, about the pain. And we talked about my guilt. I started going to therapy. Something I, the strong, unshakable CEO, never thought I'd need. I learned to forgive myself. Not completely, maybe never. But I learned to understand that in a survival situation, your instincts act in ways that logic can't explain. I was a cornered animal, and my first reaction was to deflect the threat. Was it noble? No. Was it human? Terribly so. And that's the question Madison threw at me, the question that maybe you, listening to this, are asking yourself. Am I a victim who acted on instinct? or a woman who consciously let another person suffer to save herself. The truth, I think, lives somewhere in that uncomfortable gray area. Rebuilding my trust with Grace was a slow process. She watched me, she tested me. She needed to be sure that her mom, her rock, was still the same person. And slowly, she saw. She saw my sleepless nights, she saw my therapy sessions, she saw my tears. And she understood that I was a victim too, even if I carried my own scars and my own guilt. The day she came home from school, hugged me out of nowhere and said, "I love you, Mom. I believe you." Oh, on that day, I felt like the sun was finally starting to shine again. While my personal life was rebuilding, my professional life exploded. With Michael and Jordan gone, I cleaned house on the board. I promoted Aisha to Chief Operating Officer, a position she had deserved for years. We hired new auditors, put in security controls that made a scheme like that impossible to pull off again. And the company, free from the parasite that had been bleeding it dry, flourished. Our profits soared, our reputation strengthened. Williams Logistics became a reflection of my own resilience. One night, almost a year after everything, I was in my office late, reviewing the quarterly reports. I looked over at the empty chair where Michael used to sit in meetings. I didn't feel anger anymore, or pain. I felt pity. Pity for the wasted life, for the greed that consumed him, for the good man he might have been once before he got lost. I picked up an old photo of my first husband, James, that I always kept on my desk. His eyes in the picture seemed to be smiling at me. I wondered what he would say about all this. I think he'd say I protected his legacy, that I protected our daughter, and that, in the end, that's what matters. And in that moment, looking at the picture of the man who gave me everything, I finally felt at peace with the woman I had become. Today, a little over a year after that day, turned my life upside down. I can say that I'm okay. More than okay, actually. I feel more my own person than ever before. Williams Logistics is stronger than at any point in its history. We've grown 45% in the last year. With Aisha running operations, the company runs like a Swiss watch. We've put in new controls, brought in new people, people we can trust. The poison was removed, and the body, my company, has healed. My relationship with Grace, who's 16 now, is the most precious thing in my life. That dark period brought us together in a way I never imagined was possible. There are no more secrets, no more doubts. There's a mutual understanding, a deep respect. She's grown into an incredibly strong and insightful young woman. And I've learned that being strong doesn't mean you don't have scars. It means knowing how to live with them. As for Michael, well, he's exactly where he belongs, serving his 15-year sentence in a federal prison. The news I get is sparse and comes through the lawyers. He lost everything. The money he stole was recovered and returned to the company. The reputation, the power, the charm. It all dissolved under the fluorescent lights of a prison cell. He tried to steal an empire from me, and in the end, the only thing he owns is an orange jumpsuit and an ID number. And Madison. For a long time, I wondered about her. Her accusation on the phone, as painful as it was, came from a place of unimaginable grief. A few months ago, I was in Birmingham, Alabama, for a logistics conference. During a break, I went into a small coffee shop to grab a coffee, and there she was, behind the counter. Our eyes met. The world, once again, seemed to stop. She was thinner. The light in her eyes had dimmed, but there was a strength there that hadn't existed before. I didn't know what to do. Leave? Pretend I hadn't seen her? But I was tired of running. I walked up to the counter. We didn't say much. I ordered a coffee. She made it in silence. When she handed it to me, our hands brushed for a second. "I'm so sorry, Madison," I said, and the words came from the bottom of my soul. "For everything." She looked at me for a long time, and then she just nodded. There was no big moment of forgiveness, no hug, but in that nod, I felt an understanding. A quiet acceptance that we were both survivors of the same catastrophe, each carrying our own wreckage in a different way. She's rebuilding her life, far away from everyone and everything that hurt her. And I pray she finds peace. I thought romantic love was over for me. I thought Michael's betrayal had poisoned that part of my soul for good. But life, oh, life has a funny way of surprising you. 6 months ago, at one of those same business conferences, I met a man. His name is Christopher. He's 52, owns a tech company in Chicago, and he's a widower too. His wife passed away a few years ago, also from cancer. We started by talking about work, about logistics and algorithms, but soon the conversation shifted. We talked about loss, about grief, about what it's like to raise children on your own. He was kind, had a calm smile and eyes that truly listened. For the first time in a long time, I felt light. One night, over dinner, I decided to tell him. I told him everything. The story of Michael, the poison, the prison, my guilt. I needed him to know who I was, the baggage I carried. He listened to it all in silence, without interrupting. When I finished, I expected to see shock, maybe even disgust in his eyes. But no, he just reached his hand across the table and covered mine. And then he said something I'll never forget. Catherine, you are not defined by the worst day of your life. You are defined by how you stood back up after it. We're taking it slow. Dinners, phone calls, weekend trips when our schedules line up. It's a grown-up relationship built on honesty and mutual respect, not on the need to fill a void. And most important of all, Grace approves. She met him, and after he left, she came to me and said, "Mom, he looks at you the same way Dad used to." And coming from her, that was the greatest blessing I could ever receive. Today, I look back and I see the woman I was, confident, yes, but maybe a little naive, a little blind to the darkness that can hide behind a handsome smile. The pain broke me, but it rebuilt me stronger. I've learned that true strength isn't about never falling, but about how many times you can get back up. I protected my legacy, I protected my daughter, and I found a new beginning where I thought there would only be an end. The moral question about that day, about that plate of food, it's still there, a tiny scar on my soul. But I know now that it doesn't define me. It's just a reminder of the price of survival. And you, what would you have done in my place? Do you think I did the right thing? Let me know in the comments what city you're listening from. And if you enjoyed my story, please leave a like on the video so the channel can keep bringing you more stories like this. Thank you for all your kindness. On the screen, you'll see another story that I'm sure you're going to love. Go ahead and click to watch. Oh, and if you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, don't forget to subscribe, okay? Until the next story.